I know you all have a very busy schedule at the IGF, and I don't want to keep you longer than we have to. Just so everybody knows, this is workshop number 32, which is called Mobile and the Internet of Things, Expand Inclusions for Persons with Disabilities. As you'll note here, I'm just delighted by the diversity of speakers and participants both in the room and I hope remotely. We hopefully will have a remote a speaker participating via remote. My name is Barbara Warner. I'm Vice President of ICT Policy at the U.S. Council for International Business, which co-organized this workshop along with the Ministry of Education and Science at the Government of Portugal. Special thanks to Ana Neves of Portugal's Ministry of Education and Science for her support in helping to organize this. Just to give a little bit of introduction, we live in an age when we are increasingly seeing ICTs such as mobile telephone, M2M, machine-to-machine technology, and the Internet of Things harnessed in very innovative ways to enable people with various disabilities to live fuller lives and make important productive contributions to the digital economy. I think this is one of the miracles that we have of technology and how it's enabling more people to contribute. This is a very exciting development, but importantly, we are seeing how these technologies may be used in ways to provide societal benefits. This is all the more significant for the estimated 1 billion people who are living with some form of disability. In this workshop, speakers will share both business and governments, how both business and governments are deploying advanced ICT technologies to increase accessibility, support, and services for people with disabilities. We will consider a number of factors, such as infrastructural and technical requirements, financial support, policy and regulatory frameworks that ideally should be in place to enable both developed and developing countries alike to effectively engage this underutilized talents of this very important segment of the global population. At the end, we'll also offer some best practices and strategies that hopefully you can take home with you, aimed at realizing continued progress in this area. I'd like to briefly introduce our speakers. However, we have compiled their biographies, which may be accessed at the web link on this PowerPoint slide. I won't read it out to you, it's pretty long, but it's posted on my organization's website, and we just felt that was a way to go green rather than give you more paper, load you up with more paper. Moving to our speakers, first we have Andrea Sachs, who is a long-time and highly respected advocate for accessible ICTs and who has played a leadership role in the ITU's joint coordination activity on accessibility and human factors. Next, we have Jacqueline Ruff of Verizon Communications, who will discuss Verizon's deployment of emerging technologies as part of their services to the broad cross-section of their users. Next, we'll have Raquel Gatto of the Internet Society, who will explore solutions and innovations from the technical community's perspective. Then we will have Anna Smirnova, who's joining us from Russia, and special thanks to Freedom House, who made her participation possible. She will share her experiences promoting the Metro for All project. We are also honored to have 3 speakers of governments participating on this panel, who will talk about what their respective governments are doing in this area. Hopefully, we will have participating via remote Abir Shakweer from the government of Egypt. Jorge Fernandez from the government of Portugal will be joining us following his flash session. We have Tracy Weisler from the U.S. Federal Communications Commission, and we have Gunilla Astbrink, who is director of iStock Australia, but works very actively in government procurement. So, last but certainly not least, I'd like to recognize some important members of the team who will play important roles in making this content available to a broader audience. Our substantive rapporteur is Judith Hallerstein. She will provide the report of these proceedings. And then Michael Kendi of the Internet Society has provided a lot of support in terms of teeing up our remote participation. And we also thank our remote moderators from Brazil who are in the back. Hello. Who will help us broaden accessibility to this workshop. Okay, just to begin, I'd like to take advantage of Andrea's extensive experience as an advocate and ask if she can provide sort of an historical overview of how she has observed the evolution of accessible ICTs, perhaps drawing on her own personal experience.
Certainly, Barbara. You did warn me that you wanted me to do this. Basically, how this kind of started was back in the 60s with the first text phones, which were nicknamed TTYs, which started in the U.S. by my deaf father and two of his deaf colleagues, Jim Marsters and Robert Wetbrook. And he was a deaf physicist, and the other one, Jim Marsters, was a deaf orthodontist, and my dad was a deaf businessman. They had to use people to make their phone calls. They also did not have the ability to have the independence that an adult would have. I was dragged all sorts of places, to the bank, to the lawyer's office, and I sat there just in case the translation problem got a bit difficult, because my parents did not sign, they lip read. So once we got some technical expertise, they shipped me off to the UK, where my mother went to school, in an oral school. She did not, well, she did sign, but they got their hands beaten, if they did, in those days. And the deaf telephone network evolved. What happened, though, is that each country had a different protocol, so they couldn't work back to back. Ended up at the ITU to try to unify, and found out that it was the most inaccessible place for persons with disabilities to attend. So, being brief, it started in 1991 with the ITU, and this, of course, had evolved when other areas, but the ADA did not get passed until 1989. And therefore, the public was not totally aware that people had rights to access of anything, and this included buildings as well as ICTs, education, and many other aspects. And the International Telecommunications Union gave me a home because I learned very quickly that international standardization was the key to getting everybody to be on the same page and do the same thing. But also, my work does entail making them accessible to persons with disabilities. We now have captions, we have fellowships for persons with disabilities who have expertise to come. We provide sign language. We do a lot of different things, and we also work very hard with many different delegates from many different countries to broaden their awareness. And I want to give Brazil a compliment. They have done very, very well in terms of accessibility here. So that's a brief overview.
Would you say there was one specific development during all these many years that was the significant breakthrough that sort of got you in the door, got the message out there, at the ITU in particular?
Well, there were two. We did the first deaf transatlantic call, and also that was something that nobody thought deaf people could talk back, over the international telephone network. And the other thing was the fact that the ADA was the first legislative document that gave people rights, and it would not have happened unless the deaf community was able to lobby. There were many people, in fact, one of our colleagues together, Karen Pell-Strauss from the FCC, who Tracy knows quite well, was one of the authors of this, that later we had, that was probably the biggest breakthrough because countries have used that particular document to pattern their own.
And ADA is American
Disabilities Act.
Thank you. If I could turn now to Raquel, the Internet Society's paper, which served as the background document for this workshop, explores a variety of barriers faced by persons depending on their specific disability. Could you elaborate on that?
Of course, thank you, Barbara, for the invitation first to join the panel, and Andrea for sharing her historical perspectives. I also, as the Brazilian on the table, I want to say a big welcome for all of you, and a hi for the remote participants with our moderator, Michael, my colleague. So just to highlight that, I will share here some of the studies and highlights that Internet Society has gathered through the collaboration of our staff and the membership experts, being one of them, Gwenella, who joins us today. So Gwenella is here, I was looking for. So, who authors this 2012 paper and helped also with other expertise materials. So, but before going down into these studies, I want to bring back us to the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, who was just approved in September. Just because disability is mentioned several times in this document, on access to education, on economic growth, on reduce of inequality, and so on. And specifically, I was reading the text and highlighting some of the quotes that I ask you to listen now. We envisage a world of universal respect to human rights and human dignity, a just, equitable, tolerant, open, and socially inclusive world in which the needs of the most vulnerable are met. And further on, people who are vulnerable must be empowered and include people with disabilities, of whom more than 80% live in poverty. That's 80%, 80%, if my English is no good. So that's a really significant number. And we should also remember the number that Barbara brought in the beginning. We have about 1 million people living with some form of disability. 1 billion, sorry. Yes, 1 billion. So those numbers show something, right? And we could go in several directions, but the fact that we are facing today, the issue that we are facing today in this workshop is on the dimension of how to expand inclusion through technology. And that's where internet got in, right? That's where the internet is an opportunity, offers this opportunity for. And it's not by coincidence that I wanted to mention that last year, International Day of Persons with Disabilities also brought the theme of sustainable development, the promise of technology. So this all has been converging. So internet technologies have this potential to give persons with disabilities the means to live on a more equitable basis within the global community in a manner that previously was not possible. While it has been traditional to address the internet and disabilities issues related to the web accessibility, the expansion of multiple devices interconnected is rapidly changing the scenario. So the growing use of mobile internet is important to everyone, and users with disability may in fact rely more on mobile services. We also have our global 2015 internet report that is authored by Michael that highlights that 58% of respondents with motor disability use mobile to access the internet. Take up by people with low vision is even higher. It's about 80% again of those who were surveyed that took mobile accessibility, with 13% of those who are using mobile as their primary internet access device, and 63% using accessibility settings from their phones, so like in the iPhone, the VoiceOver, and so on. So, but it's important to take this, right? It's the title of the panel, and this idea that this small device that we bring with us has several features like there is a camera, there is a touch, there is a lot of potential to help people with disabilities. We also highlight in the Global Internet Report some of the examples of some of the applications that exist, like Be My Eyes, who helps people who couldn't see and bring in voice what they are looking for. But it's not only mobile that is the device on the road for the ubiquitous internet. So this idea that we are all connected. Consumer products, durable goods, cars, trucks, industrial utility components, sensors, we have a lot of objects who are now being combined with internet connectivity, and brings also a powerful data analytic capabilities that promises and are already transforming the way we work, we live, and we play. That's the Internet of Things. That's the Internet of Things happening now. And so it promises to offer this revolutionary, fully connected, smart world as the relationships between objects, their environment, and people become more tightly intertwined. And it should be no different for people with disabilities. Yet, we do have challenges to achieve this goal, and consider if we wanted to achieve this potential and benefits for all. So the path is clear, right? We need to overcome these barriers. And which are those barriers? I'm sure the panel can bring up several examples. I'm going to bring just 3 barriers that I want to highlight, and I think they're the ones we should tackle with priority. Accessibility, meaning that people with disabilities should be able to use a product or a service as effectively as a person without it, right? They should have access to it. Remember, I said in the beginning, 8% are in poverty. So we need to have, and so based on their low income and sometimes limited educational opportunities, we need to have lower costs for this device, for the connectivity. I mean, in several layers, we need to think about affordability. And I also want to mention that over 100 governments signed the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and it brings obligations to lower the costs of, to bring to a minimum costs the access for people with disabilities. The third one is availability. Availability ranges from the access to the infrastructure, and by that I mean the internet, the ICTs, and to range from this to the limited availability of technology and devices, access to that. So when barriers are removed, persons with disability can fully contribute to society. Government, industry, and other stakeholders should take those barriers into account as a priority to create an enabling environment that can unleash the potential and the full potential of the internet and bring the internet of opportunities to all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raquel, and particularly for linking this in with the Sustainable Development Goals. I think that's an important overarching theme of this IGF. I have a question for both Andrea and Raquel. To what extent do cultural factors, particularly in emerging economies, inhibit progress in this area?
Probably the lack to broadband and wireless connectivity, because one of the other things I didn't mention was that mobile telephony has also been a major breakthrough because of SMS and also being able to communicate over wide places of distance, because Africa is a huge country, for example, and in South America there is a very dense population, as I understand it, of mobile usage, as it is throughout the world. But would this be an opportune time to mention the problem that I spoke about with you later, or do you want to hit that one later regarding mobile phones and hearing aids?
Can we get that later?
We certainly can.
Okay.
And that's probably the main thing that I would comment on at this point.
Okay.
So apart from, and I think Andrea already tackled the culture, if you think about in terms of developing countries and access to infrastructure is one, but there is one that is not related also to the technology itself, but it's also on taking people with disabilities on the same ground as anyone else, right? So it's fulfilling this society role that is not taking as pity or shame or, this this cultural thought that needs to be worked on beyond technology. So that's one of the points I want to highlight.
Great, thank you. Now let's consider how businesses are endeavoring to make their services more fully inclusive to communities as a whole. Jackie Ruff of Verizon Communications. Verizon has been a long-time provider of a wide range of services. Can you share with us how these services have evolved over time to take advantage of important innovations, such as mobile telephony, cloud computing, Internet of Things?
Sure. Thank you. And thanks everyone for being here in this session. I look forward to the part of the session where we can have a conversation and a dialogue, hopefully with many of you who are in the room. And I'm also just going to take a personal moment because you were talking about the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I acted as a staffer at the Senate committee that really took the leadership, Senator Harkin, on that. And I still have a photo of the day that our committee approved that. It was amazing because of the outpouring of lobbying from persons with many different types of disabilities coming to our Congress. It's so clear how necessary this was. And it was a major change. And of course, companies, many businesses were very supportive of that. Verizon is a communications provider in the US, a large communications provider of both fixed wireline service, and nationally we are actually the largest of the wireless providers. Outside the US, we offer enterprise services. So if you look at our customer base and just look at it that way, given that in the United States about 1 in 5 of Americans has some type of disability, these are our customers, and we are highly motivated to do everything possible to make our own service inclusive. So it was in around 1989 that as a company we adopted universal design principles, and over the years made our customer service centers accessible. So introducing a video phone customer service that would work for persons who are using sign language, doing that on the fixed side, then on the mobile side. And more recently, trying to use, as Barbara said, all of the technologies of mobile service, cloud service where data can be stored remotely and accessed from all around our country, our customers there, but also potentially all around the world. And then more recently, Internet of Things. And I think Raquel did a very nice description of the use of the sensors, the data analytics, taking data that may not make any sense at all, but making it then usable by everyone, but including particularly our focus today, persons with disabilities. So I wanted to give a couple examples of what we're doing in that area and talk about 3 products, services that we've developed recently as Verizon, and then one that is a little bit more general. That I have a newspaper clipping to share. It's online. You could see it, of course. But the first one that we've developed recently is called VelaSense, and that a number of different providers have it. But it's just the simple idea of combining a number of different applications. In our case, it's on the Android platform, to assist the blind and visually impaired with everyday tasks and supporting higher levels of independence. So it's an all-in-one combination of different access to applications that's voice activated. And those include mapping, color recognition, directions, magnifiers, and reading of barcodes. So, for example, if you're going through the supermarkets and trying to figure out what the price of your purchases would be. Another one that's even more recent and is part of a very interesting program that Verizon does is called Sesame Phone. Now, the program is called Powerful Answers. We've done it, I think maybe this is the 3rd year that we've done it. We do a global competition where we ask people to come with new services or new applications and to propose those for a theme. We've got one running right now, which is using different services for responding to emergencies, healthcare, natural disaster. But last year, one of the, and we put $6 million out there. There are 3 $1 million prizes, I guess you would call them, then others that were are smaller in number. One of the winners last year was a company it's based in Israel that developed something called Sesame Phone. And the company's called Sesame Enable. So it's a movement tracking phone. In this case, that's what allows it to function. And it's intended to bring independence to persons who have debilitating illnesses such as, or conditions such as severe arthritis or Parkinson's. And it's very easy to use. That's one of the keys here. Comes straight out of the box with pre-installed software. So as I said, it has motion tracking and voice commands. So this is one we do a global push out. You know, come in with your proposals. We'll help you work with them, what they look like. And then this won the $1 million award last year, and is out there and available. The other example I thought I know I should have it on my phone, and I could, but to me this was just so striking. It was an article in our Washington paper, I think it was last week or so, and it says, "App serves as eyes for the blind," and it's a story of an Android, again, actually I think maybe it's on, well, it's called Navcock. Navigation application. And this person is walking through a college campus. She has her earbuds on. She looks like, 9 out of 10 of us would be walking through that campus if we're listening to music or doing something else. But what is happening is that her phone is a sensor, and there are beacons, they're calling them beacons, throughout that campus that are giving her either voice or vibration indications of where she should turn next and so on. And there's a discussion of the future where if that can be combined with things like facial recognition or other ways of sort of having computer vision that can be communicated and transferred to a person like her, then really her ability to navigate the environment and be on a much more similar standing to others will be remarkably enhanced. So it's very important and exciting. I just wanted to give you a couple thoughts on how we make these things happen, because as I was thinking about this material, it's very much about multi-stakeholderism, isn't it? Because you have a business here wanting to having a network, services, customer relationships, partnering with the technical community for a lot of the things that are being built to this network, to this Internet of Things potential, with input from civil society. We work very closely with many different types of groups that are representing persons with disabilities. We always have. And in close contact with our government. The FCC is very much a leader around this, and we're active participants, and even our Congress, going back to our initial story about the legislation that was passed. And so getting this right and making progress really has to be done in this way. The specific thing that we're now doing to bring this back to our Internet of Things is Verizon several weeks ago announced something called ThingSpace. This is an IoT platform where, again, at our innovation centers, which we have in San Francisco and in the Boston area, we've created a setup, an opportunity for everyone to come, whether you're a developer of an application or somebody who wants to be helpful and think about how it could be used and integrated into other things. It's very much about an open environment. You don't have to have a pre-existing relationship with Verizon. Gives you the ability to work with experts, the connectivity of the network to use as you try to experiment with things, ideas on how to work with the data that you would get with Internet of Things. So we can talk more perhaps about public policy, I think, that can encourage all of this, but I hope I've given you a sense of some of the things. It's a process of continuity for many decades, but now trying to take these issues into the best of technology, which hopefully can be leapfrogged into developing countries, as is possible in so many ways when you're using mobile service. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Jackie, and I really appreciated your drawing in the multi-stakeholder model as serving as the basis for a lot of this innovation. I think we all need to be reminded of the importance of that, particularly at this IGF, another very important overarching theme. Actually, I'd like to turn to Anna, because she also can talk about a business that she's involved in, Metro for All. I understand that Metro for All in Russia uses geospatial technologies to facilitate the right of people with disabilities to free movement. Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you for letting me speak on this panel. And I would like to start by totally agreeing with Jackie. That's what I thought about. That's what I thought about really for a long time about multi-stakeholder model. And in this instance, I represent both technical community really and business and to some extent civil society. So I hope it will be clear from what I'm saying later. So first, let me explain what Metro for All is. This is the name of the project and the application which helps people with disabilities, specifically people with reduced mobility, to better navigate public transport networks. Right now we do it by providing people with disabilities with applications which contain really detailed information about all the accessibility facilities, about all the possible barriers that they will encounter on their way while they use the subway systems. At the same time, this data and this application also can be used and are indeed used for analysis, for research, for tracking down the access problems at the particular stations and at the particular subway networks. So our project is also about monitoring of accessibility situation in public transport systems. So as for the use of geospatial technologies, Metro for All project is developed and supported by Next.js company, and we focus, our main area of expertise is geospatial technologies. So, for example, this is like really sophisticated information and navigation systems, which are used while building public roads and utilities and communication lines. So we are used to working with really big amounts of data, which relates to objects which are distributed in space, but at the same time connected to each other. So we constantly developing new technologies which help process and utilize this data. So what we wanted to do and what we are trying to do is to bring those technologies, implement these technologies in our Metro for All applications. Well, right now the applications are all in prototype stage, but there is a lot of development going underway, including smart routing, including positioning inside subways, and we really hope to work with beacon technology soon. So to sum it up, the Metro for All project is our contribution to a social issue and indeed a human rights issue for people with disabilities having a right to free movement. And also for us, it's a really interesting technological challenge.
Just a quick question. Where does Metro for All get its accessibility data? From the official subway website or other public sources?
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. That's a really good question because, no, indeed, we are now present in 14 cities in 7 countries. And none of these cities, none of the official sources in these cities has the data which we use in our applications. And this is the data about, for instance, the maximum slope of the ramps or the width of the doors and the number of steps which person with disability will have to, will meet when he's entering the subway station. So we had to start collecting it ourselves, and we're doing it. There is a methodology, we're using it, and we have volunteers joining us, so we are crowdsourcing effectively. And the result is really interesting because at the moment, the data we collected, and which is available from applications, we know that it is also used by official subway employees, particularly those who help people with disabilities. And in official talks, they informed us that it's much easier for them to use our applications, totally unofficial ones, than to request the same data inside their subways from the next door department. That's like the bureaucracy is awful. So, yeah, as I said, just to to be clear, we are based in Moscow. We have started in Moscow. So that's why that's first about subways, because in Russia the subway system is the ultimate public transport system. That's why, and 10 million people use it each day, and really not a lot being done to make it accessible. So, but now we are expanding, and we are hoping to add other public transport systems soon to our applications.
Thank you. No, and again, that's another wonderful example of how stakeholders working together, each stakeholder brought an important perspective to the table, and between all the stakeholders, you developed something that was superior to the product maybe of just one stakeholder.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. Thank you.
Excellent. Actually, I'd like to pose a question again to both Raquel and Andrea. First, I'd like to ask Raquel to enlighten us about the importance of standards development related to accessible ICTs. And I think related to that, Andrea, let's go to the point that you and I talked about earlier, that some forms of mobile telephony can interfere with assistive listening devices. If you could share with us that development.
Thank you, Barbara. So I'm not a technical person, so I'm not going deep on the technical issues, but the underlying message is whenever you are developing the technology, you need to consider the people with disabilities, the limitations and the technical aspects that will include those people, right? Those persons. So we do have a couple of examples while in the technical standards development. I'm sure Andrea will tackle the I2 and others with more expertise. We do have the web accessibility, so W3C working, especially the guidelines, the web content accessibility guidelines, which are good points to highlight over this process of considering people with disabilities on the development process. But also I want to highlight the IETF work. So the Internet Engineering Task Force is the one, each has its realm, and that's where the Internet protocols are developed. And it has been working for a while also on some of the disabilities issues, like providing real-time text protocols which are important, for example, for deaf people, so who has hearing impairment. And it has also been evolving into other working groups. So it's open for anyone, for the participant of anyone interested. Most of the discussions are done through mailing lists, and so you can join, you can bring in your expertise. You don't need to be fully technical to bring those issues. We have seen now more this convergence on, for example, human rights and others. So just to highlight them, these opportunities that for the technical standards development, that it needs to be intertwined. But also on the validation tools, that's another aspect that is important. While you were a technician, you were not directly involved on the development of the protocols, the standards, but you are developing technology, you are creating this technology. You also need to have tools that can help you understand what are the limitations, and if your product or your service is, I'm trying to avoid the lawyer wording compliance, but that's where kind of it's the word that came in mind, that you need to have this kind of validation. So that's my, thank you.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, Barbara. Standardization has been my life since 1991. I've learned a great deal from the engineers. I am personally not an engineer, but by proxy, I might as well be, because I've learned a lot about technology, especially in the situation of including persons with disabilities and preventing new barriers and solving the barriers that already exist. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the ITU, other than the fact we have 3 sections. We have the ITU-T, which is the telecommunications standardization part, which handles multimedia. And some broadcasting as well. Then we have the ITU-R, which does satellite, spectrum for radio, and other issues regarding mobile telephony. Then we have the ITU-D, which is the development sector, which is taking all this information into the developing world and allowing them to have a voice. I mainly work in the ITU-T sector, but what has happened is that the ITU-R and the ITU-T have joined forces to work together. And one of the things that we found out in the last year and a half is that long-term evolution, mobile phones, which are in fact often called LTE or 4G, are interfering with what we call assistive listening devices, which we also call LTS. So I'll try not to use the acronyms, and also short range devices, which are things like Bluetooth and our wireless and our Zigbee applications. Now, that may not seem so terrible, except if you have a hearing aid and you cannot use it, or it gets blocked or stopped because of a mobile phone in close proximity to that device. And I mean close in terms of 5 meters, which is unacceptable. And some are saying, well, maybe we can get it down to 2 meters, but that's still unacceptable. Then we have the same problem that we had earlier in our history with GSM, which is what the main phones that we still currently use. Now, the problem is, I'm going to give you all just an overview, because I think if I teach some of these words to you and make you understand that this is not rocket science, everything works on spectrum. And in the world of these short-range devices, a very limited period of spectrum is available. It's 2.3 gigahertz to 2.4 gigahertz. Just remember, it's like that big. It is overcrowded. Now, if countries sell the spectrum that is being released by, in England, the Department of Defense has released theirs in the upper band above, and there is space just below to the mobile industry for them to use to sell more devices, or be able to make these devices be upgraded without taking into consideration that the actual transmission level may be way, way, way too high and unacceptable. We're going to have a major problem. We already actually have a problem in some cases because now you probably all gathered that I have a huge interest because of my background in deafness, but in the education of children with in school, they use these assistive listening devices to hear the teacher, to learn to speak, and deafness is on the rise. We have a huge population of older people who are losing their hearing due to the fact it just wears out. I'm one of them. And hearing aids, if you will now know, you don't see them very much. They're tiny, tiny little things. And some of the boys in the ITU-R, which is the radio section of the ITU, think that the hearing aid manufacturers should solve the problem. It's too small. We can't put a filter in it. So the studies are starting, but not before the different organizations that control spectrum are already giving it out. So the problem is already there. And I might just touch on the fact that deafness is increasing and combine the two, and that might save you time too. We also have another problem. Deafness is on the rise. Now, all of you have earbuds. I've seen you all wearing them. And you listen to your music, you listen to your phone calls. But at what volume and for how long? Now, one of the most uncontrollable parts of our population are the teenagers. I was one, you were one. I was one a long time ago. The volume. I used to listen to Janis Joplin, and that may be somebody you don't know, in Big Brother and the Holding Company in San Francisco in front of the Stacks. I knocked off the top range of my hearing in one go. It's that quick. But if over long use, if using earbuds or microphones that don't have the protection that industry requires, young people are going to lose their hearing, not when they're old, though it'll be worse, but now. They'll lose a lot of their hearing and it will be permanent. It'll cause tinnitus, it will cause discomfort and pain. And if all of you have time to go to the ITU website, there is a testimonial that's up. It's called Hearing Loss. Just the homepage, www.itu.int. Just go there and just listen to this young man who's only 22 tell his story about being on a treadmill, listening to his iPhone. And it's not the iPhone per se, it's how it's used. But when you see apps that increase the volume and the industry is not taking responsibility, and my partner in crime here knows about this, and it's not the industry itself, it's called, people don't know. And this is why I'm bringing it to your attention. The industry will perhaps help, but there is a distinct problem. I'm just going to quote something. A lot of times, industry doesn't think it's worth their while because of financial constraints to go down a certain road, not because they're bad guys, but because they have board members and they have stockholders, and it just doesn't seem to be a good idea at the time without some kind of pressure from the particular world that we live in. I'm just going to bring up a document so I have something in front of my face here so I can quote it properly. One of the things I have to mention, though, at this point is this has not been fully tested. The testing is preliminary, but there are finding that this is going to impact the Internet of Things, because if the Internet of Things is using things like Bluetooth, somebody walking by your window is going to knock your remote control out. It's just Bluetooth. So there are all kinds of impacts that's going to happen that are going to happen to the regular population, beside the fact that cochlear ear implants or hearing aids may be impacted, and other medical devices like an insulin pump. It's the current lack of recognition of this particular problem, which is embryonic at this moment, for the moment. We have a chance to do something about it if more people will know that it will exist. We are communicating, and I'm working with G3ICT, who I'm representing officially in the sense here, who has an organization, and I'm going to give some information of where you can come later next year to find out more about this. But it's actually 1.3 billion persons with disabilities worldwide. But there's a more interesting figure. 2.2 billion emotionally attached people exist, like close family, friends. That's about 4 people per person. That means there's $1 trillion of disposable income, and this is from the US, between persons with disabilities, and those emotionally attached. And this is an important statistic to tell industry that it is worth your while to make devices. Also, all of us are not radio engineers. We don't know when we buy something if it's going to interfere with our devices. What does a child do if it's a little baby and it's using a hearing aid, talking to its mother, and I'm thinking of England when I'm on the tube train, and the guy's just down at the bottom of the carriage, and he's using his LTD phone or looking at it, or it's on, just has to be on. And the kid's hearing aid knocks out. Is the child going to understand why? Is the school going to understand why? Are people in the street going to understand why? They won't. It is really something that I would like people to begin to recognize that we have to do something about. This particular figure of $1 trillion disposable income in the U.S. has actually been estimated now at $8 trillion disposable income worldwide between persons with disabilities and emotionally attached. And for those of you who want to know where that comes from, it comes from the Global Economics of Disability report of 2013. So I'm sure these figures have risen. Not knocking the mobile companies, believe me, they have been absolutely fabulous and cooperating in many senses, but there are many divisions. The problem is we can't go to a higher spectrum because if it's worn in the body, it doesn't work. We are not protected. There are primary considerations of protected spectrum. For one, the phones that are disappearing in our land are the landlines. They have a primary function. Mobile have number two. But these devices that we rely on that are going to affect not only persons who have severe hearing loss or who have a medical problem or who need them strictly for educational purposes or to keep themselves alive are going to be impacted without knowing why. And so we have to take this on board as a very serious problem and work and open a dialogue between the mobile companies and everybody else regarding this particular problem. And children have to be educated that they can't listen to the volume. So we want to get the makers of mobile phones to maybe look at that, or the makers of earbuds, or the makers of hearing apparatus like headphones, to take into consideration filtering. They can probably do that in a headphone. I have no idea how we're going to do it in the earbuds, but the situation also, apps that maybe signal when this is too loud for too long. So I just want the world to understand that this problem exists. It's very, very serious. And I'm hoping, somebody's popping in here next to me, I'll make room. I'm hoping you'll ask me some questions because spectrum is jammed in this little area. I mean, we don't have protection. There's one way of doing it. We could protect a spectrum that would be assigned to the hearing aid industry, the cochlear ear implant industry. The Federal Drug and Food Administration was looking at the problem at one point about 2 years ago. How far that got, I don't know. I have to follow up on that. But if anybody has any questions about that, please see me afterwards. So I hope you've got kind of an overview, learned some new words, assistive listening devices or a hearing aid, short-range devices like Bluetooth and Zigbee. So again, your future is dependent on the fact that new technology, expanding technology, does not create new barriers, not only for persons with disabilities, but for the rest of us in the world.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Yeah, thank you, Andrea. I believe we have our remote participant ready.
Thank you, Chair. We are going to pass to Mr. Umber.
Okay. Hello, Abir, are you on the line?
Hello? Hello?
Yeah. Hello.
Hello?
Thank you. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great.
Abir is joining us from the government of Egypt, and we have a terrible echo in the room, but I'd just like to invite you to share with us what the government of Egypt is doing to create a better future for Arab-speaking persons with disabilities.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank you for giving me the chance to participate remotely, since I didn't be able to come to Brazil. And I would like to make sure that you are hearing me quite well.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, I have to say that the main challenging facing people with disabilities in Egypt is actually the exclusion from the society for a long period of time, and this, of course, has led to a lot of consequences, starting from the mindset about people with disabilities, how to deal with them, the existing infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So we at the ministry, we actually understand that technology and information technology in particular can help to a great extent the inclusion and empowerment of people with disabilities. And in Egypt, we have 15 million people with disabilities. So we developed a strategy in 2012 for the empowerment of PWDs, and we work on three main pillars. The first of all is the technological accessibility of services, capacity building of PWDs, and the development of assistive technologies which support the Arabic language, because this is actually a main challenge where most of the assistive technologies available for PWDs do not support the Arabic language. So when it comes to services, we start by developing accessible official website for our ministry to allow PWDs to know the relevant information and to apply for training courses and grants offered by our ministry. And also we are working with the Ministry of Education to equip all schools for persons with disabilities and the inclusive schools with the required infrastructure and the required assistive technologies. And so far, we finalized 260 schools in 2 years out of an initiative for equipping 1,000 schools. We also equipped one center for people with disabilities in each public school, in each public university, with the text-to-speech software, with the braille printers, with the data shows, and any other, all the other required assistive technologies. The second pillar is the building the capacity of PWDs, and in order to do this, we launched 2 grants. The first is the ICTL, and this was launched based on the request of PWDs themselves to be able to better communicate through ICTs. And the second grant, which is very challenging for us, is the training for employment. And this grant was launched in cooperation with the ICT companies and several NGOs, and it focuses on identifying vacancies at those companies. And we also identify the required skills for such jobs, and we train people with disabilities on the needed skills, and then we go back and hire them at the collaborating companies. At the beginning of this project, we had a problem because people were not really confident that people with disabilities are productive. So we thought of an innovative model, and we brought an NGO to collaborate with us to pay the salaries of the people with disabilities over the first year, and in a decreasing way. So for the first 6 months, the salaries are paid completely by the NGO. For the 3 months, 50% has to be paid by the company, and for the last 3 months of the first year, 75% of the salaries have to be paid by the company. So we give the ICT companies the chance to examine the productivity and skills of people with disabilities in a practical way. And so far, we hired 70% of the graduates of this grant, and they are doing very well according to the companies. And after this first year, most of the employees or the employed PWDs are still in their companies. The last thing I would like to mention is the
Abir, we're having audio problems.
Okay. So you are not hearing me anymore?
Yes, we're having trouble hearing you.
Okay. Would you like me to mention any of the projects again, or
How about, can you just wrap it up with one main point that you'd like us to take away from this meeting?
Yes. I would like to mention that in the Arab world and the Arabic-speaking people with disabilities, we have different challenges, because in the developed world things are much better than here. But what we did is that we put in place a strategy that's in cooperation with people with disabilities, and we are now, I think, working in the right direction to have equipped schools, equipped PWDs with the required skills for the job market, as well as assistive technologies that support the Arabic language.
Thank you very much, Shabir. We appreciate your remote participation. It was tremendously informational to us and enhanced this workshop discussion. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, so why don't we move to our other government speakers? Governments have an important role to play, not only in promoting the access to these technologies, but also in creating a policy environment that encourages innovation in this area. Jorge, Portugal is one of the European countries that has devoted particular attention to the benefits of the information society for people with disabilities. Can you explain briefly how you're approaching this?
Hello, good morning. Hello, good morning, everyone. I don't know if it's okay with the sound. Yeah, more closer. Yeah, I will try to synthesize in 2 slides and the 15 years of improvements of policies that we have in Portugal. And I will give you some keys of we are using in our policies in promoting the information society to people with disabilities. In a green book of information society that was produced by the Ministry of Science and Technology in 1997, we could read, I think for the first time in a political document, that the information society have a great potential for inclusiveness and participation of people with disabilities in society. And we ask why information society have this kind of potential. And you know, the more important key is the access of information. The digital information have benefits that it is impossible when we are using, for example, the analog information. And it is important to have in mind that the digital content could adapt to the user needs, or if you want, to the user capacities of reading, for example. In accessibility and digital accessibility, if you read for example, the web content of accessibility guidelines, the preamble of this document speaks about a concept that is gracefully transformation of the information. So you could use, for example, what we call in nowadays the multimedia information, that is images, text, and sound. You could use any of these elements to transform in another one to give the opportunity to people to access. You could, for example, transform text in images, and you have, for example, sign language. You could do any kind of these transformations. In the policy documents that we produced in 1999 and in 2003, we have until this moment 2 specific plans to information society and to improve the information society to people with disabilities. We use 3 important keys to do that. So we know that to people access information, or either information or communication, they need assistive technologies. So we need to have a political strong vector about assistive technologies. People need to have assistive technologies. People need to have information, digital information, made with guidelines of accessibility, and people also need support services. If you have assistive technologies, if you have information, follow the guidelines, but people don't know how to use it, they don't use it. So you need also support services, you need training, you need it in education. So these 3 pillars, these 3 vectors are very important, and we put it on our policies in 1999 and 2003, and today we have it in the workplaces. We have finance of assistive technologies in workplaces. We have finance in the education, and also the social security, if the people are not study anymore, or if the people aren't working yet or don't work, they also could be supported with assistive technologies through the social security. For you have
so you've developed sort of a comprehensive policy environment that encourages both education and finance and access to these technologies.
Yeah, that's right.
Excellent.
For you have an idea, we have a financing package about 12 million euros a year to this kind of financing products.
Excellent. If we could move now to Gunilla, who will talk to us about your work on accessibility in government procurement.
Thank you very much, Barbara. I need to get a bit closer. Thanks very much, Barbara, and thank you for the invitation to speak in this workshop. Really, we're all quite selfish when we work with disability, because there's a good chance that we will benefit from the policies, the research, the standards that are being worked on. And that could be a temporary disability, we might break a leg, but as we age, there's a fair chance that we're all going to get some sort of disability. Andrea mentioned about hearing impairment. In Australia, we talk about 1 in 6 people with a hearing impairment, which is going to 1 in 4. And, you know, Andrea's examples of young people with their earbuds and loud music is a real danger for future. So I'm going to talk about public procurement. That sounds pretty boring, but government purchasing, which is what it is, can have a huge influence on how products and services are more and more accessible in future. And why is this important? Well, we're talking about mainstream ICT. We're talking about mainstream products and how with accessibility built in, and we've seen that in the Apple iPhone and the iPad, how having something out of a box that a blind person can use means it's the same as anyone else. And for an iPad, for a person with a significant communication impairment, to be using an iPad, certainly when it first came out, was pretty cool. And for a person with a severe disability to be using that really makes a difference. So including accessibility criteria in government mainstream ICT purchasing has a huge influence on the market. Because obviously industry wants to negotiate and be successful in government contracts. Governments are the largest purchasers usually in a country of ICT. So it means that generally more and more products are going to be designed with accessibility. Importantly, it can increase employment opportunities for people with disability in government agencies when there's mainstream ICT that is more accessible. And in some countries, and we've heard in the US with the Americans with Disabilities Act, if you have legislation that helps as well. Certainly in Australia we have similar legislation, and that is a great impetus for accessibility. And it has a flow-on effect. It has a flow-on effect of generally increasing accessibility of ICT in the general community. And that means that there's a reduced need for expensive assistive technology for some people with disability. Not everyone, there's always going to be a need for assistive technology, but we need the interoperability, and that's really important. So what's being done? Well, in the US, there's Section 508, and I won't go into details, but they provide guidelines on the type of functional requirements when it comes to accessibility. There's a more recent European standard, and that was created to harmonise as much as possible with a refreshed Section 508 guidelines, which haven't gone through Congress and been approved yet, by the way. In tandem with this is the revised European Union Directive on Public Procurement from 2014. And that has specific clauses about people with disability. And for example, out of 138 clauses in the preamble, number 3 referred to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability and the need to incorporate accessibility in public procurement processes. It also talks about technical requirements and interoperability. And so that interoperability is really important when we think about Internet of Things, because not only is it in the environment of a government office, but in the home environment. There's been very expensive environmental control units for people with significant disabilities and older people. And now, with smart housing coming on, it means that the affordability is going to improve, but we need that interoperability with assistive devices and between devices themselves, and that's a big danger. So again, this public procurement directive can play a big part there. Yeah, winding up. We don't have much time. Together with a colleague in Australia, we've done research into OECD countries, advocated in Australia for how the Australian government can move on this. And we're very fortunate that the Australian government listened. And so now, just late last year, there was a request for tender, which included that accessibility clause. And that's the first step probably in Australia. What next? Well, there might be more standards coming in. The G3 ICT has done a lot of work, and James Thurston from G3 ICT has worked with a number of governments, including Mexico, to see how this can progress. And Francesca from G3 ICT is sitting in the front row there with the apricot top on. There's a model accessibility toolkit, which includes public procurement policy and a white paper that is hot off the press and well worth reading when it comes to looking forwards. And it talks about industry, and industry is really keen. There's been round tables, and industry is keen because there is a possibility of developing more accessibility integrated into products once governments state, hey, we want this, and more governments are doing that. So it's a great pathway, not only in the developed world, but in the global south, so that there can again be that flow on of more affordable, mainstream, accessible ICT. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And this goes back to a point that Jackie raised earlier about governments creating sort of an enabling environment or a positive environment to encourage this sort of innovation going forward. I'd like to turn now to Tracy. No, I know this issue of ICT accessibility and inclusion is a priority for your chairman. Could you just discuss that a little bit with us and talk about what you think needs to be done to foster international cooperation in this area?
Great. Well, thank you, Barbara. Thanks so much for having me join the panel. And I know I'm between you all and a coffee break, so I'm going to go very quickly through 5 sort of headlines from the FCC U.S. environment regarding what's going on in the space and what we've done recently to push forward, as Barbara indicated, the chairman's wish for policies to be developed in this area and to really get a move on, as he says. But first, I did want to reference teenagers because we've talked a little bit about them. I actually have one, and I live with him, and he tries to live with me. But he was very excited about the panel that I'm on today when he heard about what I was doing. And he decided to do some research for me, which I thought was quite adorable. He sat at the computer for a couple of minutes and Googled his way. And he found things that astonished me because I wasn't even sure what he'd find. He said, "Mom, look at this. It's a GPS-enabled cane or walking stick." I said, "Really?" He said, "Mom, look at this. This is a Google Glass that actually live captions nearby speakers." I said, "Really?" He said, "Mom, they've got an iPad app that translates sign language into audible words." He said, "Mom, this is good stuff. This is really cool. This is my world." And I thought, well, it's really everybody's world because these things really highlight the central theme that I wanted to talk about today, which is the power and importance of broadband technology to attack the challenges facing all of us as we age, as Gunilla pointed out, and especially those living with disabilities today. And at the FCC, we like to say we're all about broadband. But it's really not broadband per se that is transformational, in my view. It's really what it enables us to do. So a broadband connection coupled with the power of the IP protocol-based technologies is really a magnificent moment here where we can push out and adapt and innovate across these technologies so that we can enhance all our lives. So with what we call the broadband revolution, we have an opportunity to get in on the ground floor, the basic fundamental level. And what our chairman likes to say is, accessibility has to be a first thought, not an afterthought. And so at the FCC, we've really determined to seize these new opportunities, and I want to tell you about 5 of them. First, we have adopted rules governing the quality of closed captioning that was actually, and I have to say, I'm ashamed to say this, it was a petition that was filed with the FCC in 2004. 2004. Took us 10 years to move on that petition. And so while I would say that the FCC is certainly on the move now, we haven't always put these issues first, and it's this chairman who's really, as I said, pushed it forward. So the rules make sure that the captions are accurate, that they're complete, timely, displayed appropriately on the screen. They also require a newer enhanced version of what we call electronic newsroom technique, which is intended to make sure that those who are deaf and hard of hearing have access to a greater amount of the local news programming. And so we're monitoring, actually, in real time, the extent to which this technique has been successful in our ongoing efforts to achieve full access for folks. And if it isn't, we're going to actually consider the need for further action in this space. We also, and this is, I think, very interesting, we've expanded the captioning requirements to include internet content. So this means that viewers who are deaf and hard of hearing can have access to news clips and other important information that have already been captioned on TV and retransmitted via the internet. This doesn't include user-generated video, so you can't go to YouTube yet, but we're hoping to see progress, and we're getting there. We have also, secondly, committed to transitioning our national deafblind equipment distribution program. And this is a program we call I Can Connect. We spend about $10 million annually on this program, servicing on an average basis about 5,000 to 6,000 individuals and families. And this is a way that we can take a pilot program in the U.S., now put it into a permanent status, and ensure that low-income people who are deafblind can get the communications equipment they need to participate fully in society. Thirdly, another good news spot. We've improved our rules requiring access to emergency information on TV for people who are blind and visually impaired. We've mandated that this information be available not only on TV sets, and this is the exciting part, but that it's also on the second screen. So these are laptops, tablets, cell phones. Fourth, and this is actually in the interest of collaboration and multi-stakeholder that's been referenced before, those kinds of rubrics, we have decided to form what's called the Disability Action Committee, the DAC, or DAC. It's a team of 40 consumer, industry, government, academic stakeholders, and they have a simple purpose, a simple goal, a simple mandate. They provide the Commission with actionable, this means that you can really do it, recommendations on policies to improve communications access in the U.S. And the DAC is off to a great start. As of last March, we've received 4 important items that the Commission is currently reviewing and trying to implement before the end of the year. Fifth, we're looking inside ourselves. That is to say, we want to make sure that the U.S. government is actually a leader through our practices, our daily service to the public. Around a year ago, the FCC became the first federal agency to use broadband interactive video to allow callers to use ASL. And we've seen a tremendous success. Most of you have or will called in to your regulator to say something about your bill, something about your contract, and want to have some help, some assistance, some information. And now this is available to the full community in the U.S. More than half the issues raised by consumers who call our ASL video line, they have their resolution of the problem right on the spot within the hour. So that's something I think we can be proud of, and we've been trying through gentle persistence to work with other government agencies such as our Social Security Administration, our Census Bureau, the people who are taking our census every 10 years, and others to try to help them implement the same service inside their walls. So I think I'll close with those 5 readouts from the U.S. Those are our headlines for today. I want to point out that should you need to learn more about any of the programs I've referenced or want to hear more about some of the technical issues that underlie them, I'm happy to provide you with some websites. And I guess to Barbara's last point, which is what are we going to do internationally? Who are we as a community internationally? How do we build this thing that we call accessibility and ICT services? The FCC is very interested in collaborating. We don't always get it right. We want to learn from Australia, Portugal, Egypt, and we believe that there's a way that we can launch by the beginning of next year a dedicated part of our portal, our website at the FCC, that it will allow for actually us to host a library of these functional programming tools translated in various languages for those that need, and actually develop a chat room with our experts in-house who are actually implementing these programs so that regulators and collaborators and multi-stakeholder entities can come together and actually use this as a reference tool. I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have time for, well, I saw two hands, so two quick questions. How's that? The gentleman here, right here, and then the second gentleman, right. Okay.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Victor. I'm from Brazil. I'm part of the Youth at IGF program, and Raquel is our tutor. Thank you for the opportunity. I write down here during the conversation some thoughts, and I'd like to share with you. In my opinion, an alternative to enhance the quality of life for people with disabilities is to encourage the technical community, business, and civil society to use, create, and share open source hardware and software. Many applications can be done easily if we can escalate the production and let this kind of technology accessible to everyone. We already heard on the beginning about an application created by a university to blind people. With accessible device to be the bridge between the inputs of the real world and the computational power, other applications like wearable devices, urban mobility applications, commercial and residential automation systems, connected prostheses, and so on, can be easily implemented. I believe that with this approach, we can reduce the costs of the infrastructure needed to run this kind of applications. With this, we enable the companies without a high-level research and development team to create new applications to fulfill this gap of products and applications to include those with disabilities. With this open material, we also permit and facilitate the capacity building to hosts want to learn and make its own application at home or inside research institutes, for example.
Okay. Could we wrap it up? Because I want to make room for the other people too.
Right. I'm working on a Brazilian project, open source project, hardware, and we opened this project right now. And we have a couple of examples running, and I'd like to share just one example, just one idea to help the person with disabilities. It's very similar to the application presented about the trains, mm-hmm. the subways. Here in Brazil, we are doing a project with the buses. You put one of these devices on each bus and one of this device on each bus stop. And with this, we can enable that people with disabilities and with no disabilities can have on their cell phones information about the buses, can get some pushes, can get some notifications about their travel, about their tracks, and receive some sound notifications and so on, vibrations. And so based on these feedbacks that I'm receiving after mm-hmm. I opened this project, and based on the comments on here, this workshop, I'm completely convinced that we need to keep on this way to look for creative and collaborative ways to solve the issues related to the inclusion of persons with disabilities. And I think that the adoption of open technology is one of the keys to enable this kind of scenarios.
Thank you very much for sharing that. Thank you. An important contribution to the substance of today's program. The gentleman that is, yes, thank you.
Hello, my name is Fernando Botelho. I'm responsible for a project we call F123. And I want to mention three items very quickly. One is Solar Ear, two is Tiflo Libros, and third is F123 Access. I think it's very interesting to see the case of Verizon, for example, which recognized Solar Ear with an award. I'm involved in Solar Ear in Brazil. I think it's very interesting to see the initiatives that are taking place in Russia, in Egypt. You know, one of the things that is clear is that we need to find ways to cooperate, to partner. I think the panel is right on target, because it's not so much that there is no interest, it is that there is a high level of complexity. And everyone in the panel, need help from organizations such as Tiflo Libros, one of the largest digital libraries for the blind in the world. Organizations such as F123, which makes web accessibility easy, low cost, and scalable for persons who are blind as well. From Solar Ear, which makes low cost hearing devices for persons with hearing disabilities. Because, very quickly, 10 years ago, Facebook started around approximately. When did they start having a large-scale effort to make their online resources accessible? Well, this year, earlier this year. We, persons with disabilities, cannot afford to wait a decade for disability, for accessibility to become a priority. And this was not because they had little budget, because they did not have the technical expertise. It's simply because internet companies have enormous pressures, competitive pressures, and there is a high level of complexity if you do not get our community involved. So I encourage you to do more of what Verizon is already doing with its awards, and more of what Russia and Egypt are doing by getting NGOs involved in their projects, because you need us as much as we need you.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. And I'll just, okay, you have 5 seconds.
On 2 minutes. Can I speak in Portuguese?
I don't, I'm sorry, I don't understand Portuguese.
Okay.
Oh, okay, all right. Quickly.
Bom dia.
Good morning.
De cidadania que trabalha justamente com essa inclusão sociodigital.
We work with social inclusion, digital inclusion.
Lá nós vemos essa dificuldade de como incluir pessoas com.
There we observe the difficulty of including people
com
with disabilities.
Esses tipos de software proprietário. Então a gente trabalha totalmente com.
Key difficulty is proprietary software.
Com software livre.
So we work with open source software.
É uma dúvida que eu tenho quando eu vejo.
I have a doubt, a question.
Esse tipo de discussão sobre essas tecnologias
about these technologies,
ao meu ver,
that in my view,
não são inclusivas.
Are not inclusive.
Porque quem precisa de ter acesso a esse tipo de tecnologia,
to have access to these kinds of technologies,
não necessariamente vai ter o dinheiro necessário para
will not necessarily have the money
para poder ter acesso e participar e ser realmente incluído.
And be truly included.
Então, um ponto que eu gostaria de levantar
a point I want to raise
é que antes de pensarmos em inclusão,
before we think about inclusion,
I think we can quickly address your question since we're running out of time.
Yeah.
Andra, just quickly, please.
I'm just going to tell you that all standards are not costly. We do use open standards, and I'm speaking from as the ITU perspective. Can you translate that for me, Fernando? All ITU standards are downloaded free. So if it's a standard on the ITU, you can have it free. So there's one small problem. If open source standards are not maintained, then sometimes they go by the wayside. So one has to take a look at both sides of the coin. And we are using for instance, the FCC ACE relay service platform, an open standard relay service platform, but it does have regular standards in it. So open source on its own is not the solution. We all need to work together and get the right kind of standardization, the right kind of open source inclusion, and we need to communicate. So come see me afterwards and we'll have a chat and I'll get somebody to translate. Thank you.
Can I very quickly add that MetReferral is totally open source and open data, so you can come and talk to me afterwards as well. Sorry. Thanks.
Gunilla also has a comment too.
I think open source has a very important role. An example is screen reading software for vision impaired people called NVDA. And it is free for users. It's based on open source, available on the Microsoft platform. But it costs money still to develop.
Okay.
So I just wanted to make a point that it is important. It can be successful because it means that the end user benefits with freer software.
Okay. Okay, quickly.
I'd like to add, for example, if you see the screen readers market, you see that if you buy a screen reader, if you need to buy a screen reader, is completely different when we have a mainstreaming technology that already have the screen reader. We need to jump from the units or thousands to billions of units that all of us pay and use who need it. And this is the mainstreaming technology. I think this will happen when the companies don't see the accessibility like a social responsibility, but a vector of quality of products. Okay.
Thank you very much, and we've run over. We clearly needed another hour to go through everything, but I just wanted to thank all of our speakers for just generously sharing their expertise, and I hope everyone here got something of value from this workshop. That was the intent. I think we've touched on a lot of very important issues, and again, I keep hearing the importance of multi-stakeholder, having multiple stakeholders at the table to grapple with these issues. We've talked about new challenges. We've talked about the importance of standards development and interoperability of standards. And we've talked about the importance of reaching out and cooperating internationally. So I think we have a lot of food for thought here, and hopefully this will serve as a foundation for our follow-up workshop next year at the IGF. And another important thing about the IGF is we wouldn't be having, is it serves as an important venue for these types of conversations and information sharing. So thank you all for attending, and let's thank our speakers.